The morning sun was just beginning to spill its golden light across the small town, and the streets were already buzzing with activity. People hurried past each other, some carrying coffee, others balancing stacks of papers, all moving with purpose. But inside the local theater, there was a very different kind of energy. The theater had been transformed for the day into an audition hall for a prestigious singing competition that drew hopefuls from all over the region. Nervous excitement mixed with ambition filled every corner. Chairs were set in rows for the judges, tables were scattered with registration forms, and the stage was brightly lit, waiting for the performers to take their chance. The air was thick with anticipation, and everyone there carried their own dreams, some big, some fragile, and some so carefully hidden that only a few knew they existed. Among the contestants, there was a simple woman quietly making her way into the theater. She was not dressed in anything fancy, just a plain dress that had seen better days, and her shoes were practical rather than stylish. Her hair was tied back in a neat braid, and her hands carried the faint marks of a life spent working hard rather than preparing for showy displays. She moved slowly, almost hesitantly, glancing around as she stepped into the busy room. Her eyes, however, were alert and shining with a quiet determination. She carried a small folder with the lyrics and notes of her song, pressed tightly against her chest. Her heart thumped as she watched the other contestants, many of whom wore sparkling dresses, fashionable jackets, or had spent hours perfecting their appearance. The contrast was striking, and it was clear that she looked out of place. Immediately, a few contestants nearby noticed her. They exchanged smirks and nudged each other. One of them whispered under his breath, "Look at her. Does she really think she belongs here?" Another rolled her eyes, shaking her head. They laughed quietly, thinking it was harmless fun, but their amusement carried a sharp edge, one meant to make her feel small. Even some of the more confident singers, who had prepared months for this day, couldn't resist sharing their judgment. They saw her as an outsider, someone who hadn't spent hours in vocal lessons or rehearsing in front of mirrors. Her simplicity, her lack of glitzy attire, made her an easy target for ridicule. The woman noticed the glances and the whispers, but she did not react. She felt a pang of unease, a prickling at the edges of her courage, but she held her head a little higher and continued to move through the room. She knew that she had come here not to impress anyone with looks or charm, but to share something that had lived in her heart for years. She had been practicing her song quietly, night after night, in the small kitchen of her modest home. The melodies had accompanied her through hard work, long days, and quiet evenings when she was alone. It had become her way of speaking when words were not enough, her way of letting the world know that she had a voice, even if no one had heard it yet. As she approached the registration table, the staff gave her a polite smile. They were busy checking names, handing out numbers, and guiding contestants to their waiting area. She handed over her paperwork, her hands slightly trembling. "Thank you," she said softly, and the woman at the desk gave her a small nod. There was no judgment here, only routine, but it helped her feel a little steadier. She was given a number, a small slip of paper that would determine the order in which she would perform. She tucked it into her folder and made her way to a corner of the room, trying to find a space where she could settle without attracting too much attention. The corner she chose was near the back, where the sunlight from the tall windows cast long shadows across the floor. She sat down on one of the chairs, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the room wash over her. Around her, the audition room was alive with energy. Some contestants were warming up their voices, singing scales and high notes that echoed off the walls. Others were running through their chosen songs, occasionally glancing at themselves in the mirrors that had been set up along one wall. The air smelled faintly of coffee, perfume, and nervous sweat. Every so often, a judge would call a contestant's name and a performer would walk to the stage ready to share their talent. Applause followed each performance, sometimes polite, sometimes enthusiastic, and occasionally there were murmurs of criticism or surprise. The woman listened, letting the music and the reactions sink in. She did not compare herself to the others. Instead, she focused on the quiet rhythm of her own heartbeat, reminding herself that this moment belonged to her. But not everyone in the room was as kind as the staff. Some of the contestants had gathered in small clusters, whispering, laughing, and pointing in her direction whenever she shifted in her seat or looked around. Their laughter was not loud enough to disrupt the audition entirely, but it was sharp enough to feel like a prickling breeze against her skin. They spoke in hushed tones about how someone so ordinary could possibly have the nerve to compete, and they assumed that her performance would be weak, perhaps even embarrassing. They did not know her story, her dedication, or the depth of the music that lived inside her. To them, it was enough that she looked different, that she did not fit the image of a polished performer, and they allowed their assumptions to shape their judgment. The woman could hear some of it, though she tried not to let it reach her mind. She focused on the folder in her hands, tracing the edges of the pages, feeling the familiar lines of the song she had practiced so many times. Each note was etched into her memory, each phrase a reminder of the hours she had spent perfecting it. She whispered the opening lines to herself quietly, almost like a prayer, and felt a small spark of confidence begin to grow. She reminded herself that talent could not be measured by appearances, and that this song, her song, was a part of her that she could not hide. The waiting area was crowded, and as she sat, she noticed some contestants pacing back and forth, their bodies tense with anticipation. Some were quietly reviewing sheet music, while others hummed melodies under their breath. The room was a strange mixture of nerves, hope, and quiet rivalry. She felt a pang of doubt, wondering if perhaps she was foolish to be here, surrounded by so much talent and so much expectation. But she also felt a stronger, quieter voice inside her, telling her that this was her moment and that she had prepared for it in her own way. She clutched her folder a little tighter and let the music in her mind take over, imagining herself standing on the stage, letting her voice fill the space and reach the ears of those who might not even be expecting it. As the hours passed, she watched more and more contestants perform. Some were exceptional, earning applause and admiration from the judges. Others were less polished, their mistakes drawing sympathetic murmurs or gentle critiques. Each performance added to the tension in the room, and the simple woman began to feel a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Her turn would come soon, and with each passing minute, the whispers and glances from the other contestants grew more noticeable. They seemed to assume that she would be the next source of entertainment, that her performance would give them a chance to laugh or feel superior. She felt a flicker of fear, but it was tempered by the calm she had cultivated in her heart. She reminded herself that she was here for the music, not for anyone else's approval. Finally, a staff member called her number. She felt her heart leap into her throat, a combination of fear and excitement. She stood slowly, smoothing her dress and taking a deep breath. The whispers and snickers from the other contestants seemed louder in this moment, but she tried to tune them out. She held her folder close, feeling the weight of it, and began walking toward the stage. Each step felt both heavy and light, as if she were carrying the past and stepping into the future at the same time. The bright lights of the stage illuminated her path, and she could see the judges waiting with polite, expectant expressions. She walked steadily, keeping her focus on the song and the music that had carried her here. As she reached the stage, a hush fell over the room. The other contestants watched her, some with surprise, some with barely concealed amusement. The judges exchanged glances, curious about this simple woman who had come so far. She took a deep breath, feeling the music in her chest and the rhythm in her veins. She stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle, and then with a quiet confidence she prepared to sing. The whispers faded, and for the first time the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to show them what they had all underestimated. It was the beginning of something no one expected. In that moment, the simple woman was not just another contestant in a crowded audition hall. She was a vessel for her music, ready to speak through her voice in a way that would soon leave everyone stunned. The story of her performance, and the transformation it would bring to the room, was just beginning, and no one in that theater would ever forget the first note she was about to sing. She stood on the stage, the bright lights washing over her like a sudden summer sun, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The whispers, the laughter, the doubtful looks from the other contestants, all of it faded into the background. In that silence she could feel the beat of her own heart, steady but strong like a drum guiding her forward. She clutched her folder tightly, taking a deep breath, and reminded herself of the nights she had spent alone singing to the empty walls of her small apartment. No one had heard her then, but that practice had shaped her, had made her voice ready for this very moment. Backstage, she had tried to focus, humming the first few lines softly, feeling each note resonate in her chest. Now standing on the stage, she could hear the soft rustle of the audience settling, the faint coughs and the shuffling of papers from the judge's table. She closed her eyes briefly and let the music in her mind take over. It was not just a song. It was a story she had been carrying for years. A story of hope, struggle, and quiet determination. She opened her eyes, and for the first time, she felt a calmness she had never known before, a kind of connection between herself and the music she loved so deeply. The other contestants were watching her now. Some leaned forward, curiosity replacing the earlier amusement. A few of them exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that this woman, who had seemed so ordinary and unprepared, was about to perform. There was a subtle shift in the room, a sense that something unexpected was about to happen. She could feel the eyes on her, but instead of faltering, it strengthened her resolve. She told herself that she would sing for herself first and for the music second. If the world wanted to judge her, she would let her voice speak louder than their doubts. She opened her folder and positioned it carefully on the music stand, though she didn't really need it. The song was etched into her memory, every note, every pause, every breath carefully practiced over months of solitary evenings. Her hands rested lightly on the stand and she drew in a slow, deliberate breath. It felt like she was drawing in the energy of the room, converting it into something powerful she could pour out through her voice. The first note came quietly at first, almost shyly, but it carried a clarity that made the room pause. The judges leaned in, their pens hovering over papers, unsure if they had heard correctly. The laughter of the contestants backstage had completely vanished. As she continued, her voice grew, flowing naturally, effortlessly. Each note was precise yet full of emotion. The song told a story of dreams that refused to die, of challenges met with quiet courage, and of a soul who had believed in her own voice when no one else had. The judges exchanged glances, their initial skepticism replaced by astonishment. The audience, too, had gone silent, drawn into the beauty and power of her performance. It was as though the music itself had taken control of the room, wrapping everyone in its spell. Even the contestants who had mocked her before felt their smiles falter, replaced by wide-eyed amazement and a sinking realization that they had misjudged her entirely. She sang with her whole being, letting the music carry the weight of every hard day, every doubt she had ever felt, and every tiny triumph she had experienced in private. The audience could feel it too. There were tears in the eyes of some, goosebumps rising on others, and a stillness that made it clear everyone was listening, not just to a song, but to a story, a piece of someone's heart. Every note she hit was flawless, yet it felt natural, not forced. Her voice had a depth that no one had anticipated, a richness that seemed impossible to come from someone who looked so simple and ordinary. The contrast between her appearance and her talent made the impact even stronger, leaving a quiet awe in the air. The judges scribbled notes, occasionally exchanging words in hushed tones, trying to capture what they were hearing. They had seen countless auditions, but something about her performance was unique. It was not just the technical skill, which was impressive, but the emotion behind every word, the way she seemed to pour herself into the music without a trace of vanity or pretense. They were witnessing someone who had prepared not for applause or fame, but simply to sing, to share something deeply personal with the world. And the power of that authenticity was undeniable. Backstage, the contestants shifted nervously. Some who had been so confident now felt small and unsure. Their polished routines and flashy attire had not prepared them for this moment. They had underestimated someone whose life experience and dedication had forged a talent they had never imagined. There was a quiet shame, but also an awe that hung over them like a weight they couldn't shake. The woman on stage was proving without a word that appearances could be deceiving, and that true skill and passion could emerge from the most unlikely places. She reached the climax of her song, holding a note that seemed to hang in the air for a heartbeat longer than expected. The room was completely still, every ear straining, every eye fixed on her. There was no sound of shuffling, no whisper of doubt, only the pure resonance of her voice filling the theater. It was a moment that seemed suspended in time, a fleeting glimpse of something extraordinary that none of the listeners could forget. When the note finally ended, there was a breathless pause, a silence so complete that it felt sacred, as if the music itself had demanded respect. Then slowly, the applause began. At first it was polite, cautious, like people testing the waters. But it grew quickly, swelling into a roar of admiration. The judges stood, clapping along with the audience, some with tears in their eyes. The other contestants joined in, many of them still shocked, unable to hide their surprise. Some covered their mouths, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The simple woman, who had entered the room so quietly, now stood at the center of attention, her voice having shattered all expectations. She smiled softly, almost shyly, her cheeks flushed not from vanity but from the sheer release of emotion. She had done it. She had shared her music, and the world had listened. As she stepped off the stage, a staff member came to guide her backstage, offering congratulations and a warm smile. She thanked them quietly, her heart still racing, still humming with the music that had just passed through her. Contestants who had laughed at her earlier now approached with hesitant respect. Some nodded, some offered quiet words of praise, and a few even asked questions about how she had trained or prepared. She answered politely, never boasting, simply sharing her story of long hours, late nights, and an unwavering love for music. It was clear that her humility, paired with her incredible talent, made a lasting impression on everyone she encountered. Back in the waiting area, she found a quiet corner again, taking a moment to breathe and collect herself. The rush of adrenaline was fading, replaced by a calm sense of satisfaction. She had faced doubt, mockery, and skepticism, and she had risen above it all, not with arrogance but with quiet strength and skill. Her performance had spoken louder than any words ever could, showing that talent, dedication, and sincerity could overcome appearances and expectations. The room buzzed with a new energy now, one of inspiration and respect, and she felt proud to have been a part of it. Throughout the rest of the day, she continued to observe other performances, but her own experience had changed the atmosphere. Contestants now looked at each other differently, some with encouragement, others with newfound humility. The judges continued their deliberations, but it was clear that her audition had left a mark that would not be forgotten. People would talk about the simple woman who had stunned everyone with her first note. And the lesson was clear: never judge someone by appearances, and never underestimate the power of passion and practice. As the day wound down, she left the theater with her folder clutched close, walking through the evening streets with a sense of quiet triumph. The sun was setting, casting long shadows and painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. She smiled softly to herself, thinking about the journey ahead and the opportunities that might come. She had faced doubt and ridicule, but she had also discovered her own strength and the magic of her voice. And in that realization, she felt something she had never felt before, a deep, unwavering confidence that no one could take away. The story of her first note, the note that had left everyone flabbergasted, was just the beginning of a journey that promised to be as extraordinary as the music she carried within her. After her stunning performance, the simple woman returned to the waiting area, where a quiet energy had settled among the contestants. The room, once filled with chatter and whispers, now felt charged with a mix of awe and humility. People who had laughed at her before now looked at her with a new respect, some nodding silently as she passed by, others simply glancing her way, trying to process what they had witnessed. The air seemed lighter, as if the truth of talent and passion had momentarily lifted the weight of judgment that had filled the room earlier. She found a chair near the window and sat down, still feeling the echo of her own voice vibrating in her chest, a reminder of the power she had just unleashed. As she rested, she thought about the moments leading up to her performance. She remembered the nervous hums backstage, the way her hands trembled slightly as she held her folder, and the rush of energy as she stepped onto the stage. All those tiny private fears seemed distant now, replaced by a calm satisfaction that she had faced her doubts head-on. She had sung not to impress, not to seek validation, but because music was the language she understood best, and in that moment it had spoken for her in ways words never could. It was a feeling that was both exhilarating and humbling, a quiet triumph she carried in the core of her being. Around her, the other contestants were gradually regrouping. Some were practicing quietly, trying to steady themselves for their own turns, while others whispered among themselves, still discussing the performance they had just witnessed. The conversations were hushed, tinged with awe and disbelief. A few of the contestants approached her, hesitant at first, then slowly offering compliments. "Your voice, it's incredible," one said softly, unable to hide the amazement in her eyes. Another nodded, saying, "I didn't expect that. You're amazing." The woman smiled politely, not with pride but with a warm gratitude that acknowledged their words without letting them define her. She had always known her voice had strength and emotion, but hearing it recognized by others in that moment added a new layer of confidence and validation. A staff member approached, informing her that the judges wanted to speak with her briefly. Her heart skipped a beat, not from fear but from curiosity. She followed the staff member back toward the judges' table, each step measured, feeling both anticipation and calm. When she reached the judges, they greeted her warmly, a mixture of admiration and professional curiosity in their eyes. One of them, a seasoned musician with years of experience in talent discovery, leaned forward and said, "That was extraordinary. We've seen many auditions, but your voice, it carries something rare. Tell us, how long have you been singing?" She answered honestly, sharing a bit of her journey, the quiet nights practicing alone, the moments of doubt, and the persistence that had brought her to this day. The judges listened intently, nodding and occasionally exchanging glances that conveyed their growing respect for not just her talent, but her dedication and authenticity. As she returned to her seat, she noticed how the atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. Contestants who had been confident and brash now moved with caution, their laughter gone, replaced by thoughtful expressions. The simple woman realized that her performance had not only impressed the judges, but had subtly reminded everyone there that genuine talent and effort often outshine appearances. It was a quiet but powerful lesson, one that seemed to ripple through the room, leaving a lasting impression on all who had been present. Later, during a short break, a few contestants who had initially mocked her approached her more directly, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and admiration. "I didn't think you could do that," one admitted quietly. Another added, "We were wrong to judge you before. That was unbelievable." She received their words with grace, understanding the mixture of humility and surprise in their faces. She had never sought to prove them wrong. She had only sought to honor her own passion for music. Yet in that moment she realized how much her performance had impacted others, not just through technical skill, but through the authenticity and emotion she had brought to the song. The afternoon continued with more auditions, but her performance had left an indelible mark. Judges referred to her multiple times when discussing what made a performance truly memorable. Contestants glanced her way occasionally, carrying a new sense of respect and perhaps a little humility. The simple woman observed everything quietly, taking in the reactions without letting them distract her. She felt a sense of quiet pride, not in herself alone, but in the power of music to touch hearts, to shift perceptions, and to bridge the gap between expectation and reality. As the day wore on, the judges made notes about the standout performances, and it became clear that she would be moving forward in the competition. When the announcement was made, she felt a wave of relief mixed with joy. The room erupted in applause once again, this time not just for her singing, but for the recognition she had earned. Her fellow contestants approached her with genuine smiles and words of encouragement. Some asked for advice, curious about how she had cultivated such a strong, emotive voice. Others simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her talent and the lesson she had imparted through her performance. Walking out of the theater at the end of the day, she felt the evening air brush against her face, carrying a sense of calm accomplishment. The streets were quieter now, the bustle of the morning replaced by the gentle hum of evening life. She reflected on the journey she had taken to reach this point. The long hours of practice, the moments of doubt, the courage to step onto the stage despite the judgment of others. Every step, every note had brought her here, and she knew that the path ahead would continue to challenge her. But for the first time, she felt the solid foundation of confidence built not on appearances, but on skill, passion, and authenticity. As she walked home, she replayed the performance in her mind, not in a self-critical way, but with a sense of appreciation for what she had accomplished. The song had been more than a series of notes. It had been an expression of her life, her struggles, her quiet strength, and her unwavering belief in her own abilities. She smiled softly, feeling the warmth of satisfaction and anticipation for what was to come. She knew that the journey ahead would have its own challenges, but she also knew that she now carried a powerful reminder of what she was capable of achieving. That night, she sat by her window, letting the quiet of her small apartment surround her. She reflected on the reactions of the judges, the other contestants, and even the audience members who had been present. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, and the many small, unremarkable moments that had prepared her for a performance that had left everyone flabbergasted. She understood more clearly than ever that talent was not about appearances or immediate recognition, but about dedication, authenticity, and the courage to share one's heart through art. The experience had changed her, not in a way that made her boastful or arrogant, but in a way that deepened her understanding of herself and her abilities. She had faced mockery, judgment, and skepticism, and had risen above them not by trying to outshine others superficially, but by embracing her own voice and the music that had lived inside her for so long. It was a profound lesson, one that she would carry with her in every future performance, every audition, and every moment she chose to share her gift with the world. As she drifted off to sleep that night, she held on to a quiet hope, a gentle excitement for the future. The simple woman who had walked into the theater with nothing but a folder and a song had become someone whose talent could not be ignored, whose voice had the power to move and inspire. And in that realization, she found a new kind of strength, one that would guide her through the next stages of the competition and through life itself. The first note had been just the beginning, and the story of her voice was only beginning to unfold, promising a journey filled with music, courage, and the quiet triumphs of an extraordinary heart. The next day, the audition hall was filled with a different kind of energy. Word had spread about the simple woman's performance, and people were talking about her quietly in corners in hushed tones, trying to understand how someone so unassuming could possess such an extraordinary voice. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and even the contestants who had initially laughed at her felt a mixture of respect and nervousness. They knew now that they were not just competing against ordinary talent, but against someone whose dedication and heart gave her an edge that could not be measured by appearances alone. She arrived at the theater early, carrying her usual plain folder, her heart calm but alert. She had spent the night thinking about her previous performance, replaying the first note, the reactions of the judges, and the surprise on the faces of the other contestants. That memory still brought a small, warm smile to her lips. Today she would perform again, but this time the stakes felt higher. She was no longer just a quiet participant. She had become a point of reference, a source of inspiration and a challenge to those around her. Yet she did not let the attention intimidate her. She reminded herself that she had come to sing for the music itself, and not for accolades or recognition. Backstage, she noticed how the contestants moved with an added caution. Those who had once mocked her now avoided eye contact, some fidgeting nervously, others whispering apologies or compliments under their breath. The simple woman acknowledged their presence with a polite nod, never letting their previous actions overshadow her focus. She quietly reviewed her song, letting each note settle in her mind. She hummed softly, feeling the familiar rhythm resonate in her chest, grounding her and keeping her calm. The room buzzed with quiet preparation, and she could sense that today, every performance carried more weight, as each contestant tried to measure up to the standard she had set the day before. When her number was called, she stood up with the same quiet determination as before. Walking toward the stage, she felt the eyes of the audience and judges upon her, but rather than letting it unnerve her, it fueled her focus. She carried no fear of judgment, only a quiet confidence born from months of preparation and years of love for music. She took a deep breath as she stepped onto the stage, letting the bright lights wash over her, and felt the energy of the room wrap around her like a warm, familiar blanket. The judges smiled politely, leaning forward with interest, and the contestants backstage watched with a mixture of nervousness and admiration. The first note left her lips, clear, steady, and filled with emotion. The room seemed to hold its breath once more, but this time, there was a deeper sense of anticipation. The judges exchanged glances, nodding in quiet approval, recognizing the skill and heart in every phrase. The audience leaned forward, drawn into the story she was telling through her song. Each note carried a subtle power, a gentle intensity that spoke not just of talent, but of experience, of dedication, of a life spent nurturing her voice in quiet spaces where no one could hear. Her performance was a reminder that artistry often comes from perseverance and passion, not from appearances or pretense. As she continued, the reactions around her became more pronounced. Contestants who had once doubted her could not hide their astonishment. Some whispered to each other, unable to comprehend how someone so simple could command such attention and emotion. The judges were captivated, making notes and occasionally raising eyebrows in amazement. It was clear that her performance was not just technically impressive, but profoundly moving. The music seemed to fill the room, creating a sense of shared experience that transcended the physical space. People felt connected, moved by the authenticity and depth of her voice. Midway through the song, the simple woman closed her eyes, letting the music guide her completely. Every phrase, every pause, every breath was intentional, flowing naturally from the heart. She could feel the emotions of the audience, their reactions subtly guiding her interpretation, making the performance feel alive and responsive. The laughter and mockery of the past were gone, replaced by a quiet reverence that filled the room. She was no longer just a contestant. She had become a storyteller, a conduit for emotion and a source of inspiration. The judges, who had seen countless auditions, seemed genuinely moved, some leaning in closer, others exchanging looks of disbelief at the raw power of her voice. As the song reached its climax, she held a note that seemed to suspend time itself. The silence was profound, a shared breath held by everyone present. The simple woman felt the weight of the moment, but rather than falter, she embraced it fully, letting the note resonate with every ounce of her being. When it finally ended, there was a beat of quiet before the applause erupted, spontaneous and heartfelt. The room was filled with a mixture of admiration, relief, and awe. Judges clapped enthusiastically, some standing, some exchanging words of praise and astonishment. The contestants, many of them once skeptical, now approached her with respect, offering smiles and quiet congratulations. It was a moment of recognition that went beyond talent. It was a recognition of heart, courage, and authenticity. Backstage, she was approached by the judges who wanted to hear more about her preparation, her background, and her journey. She shared her story quietly, honestly, without exaggeration, describing the long nights of practice, the self-doubt she had faced, and the joy of discovering her voice. The judges listened with genuine interest, clearly impressed not just by her talent, but by her dedication and humility. They recognized that her presence in the competition added something unique, a reminder that true artistry comes from a combination of skill, passion, and perseverance. Their praise was sincere, not just for her performance, but for the character she displayed in achieving it. As she returned to the waiting area, she noticed the subtle changes in the room. Contestants who had been overly confident now carried a sense of humility. Conversations shifted from competitive whispers to respectful admiration. Some asked for advice, curious about how she had cultivated her voice, while others simply observed quietly, absorbing the lesson she had imparted without saying a word. The simple woman, for her part, remained grounded, focusing on her own preparation for the next round and reflecting on the impact her performance had had on those around her. She realized that talent could inspire, transform, and teach, even without intention, and that her journey was now intertwined with those who had witnessed it. The afternoon continued with other performances, but the memory of her song lingered in the air, a benchmark of authenticity and emotion. Judges referred to her performance repeatedly, discussing what made it exceptional and how it had elevated the competition as a whole. Contestants who had initially dismissed her were now more thoughtful, carefully considering their own performances in light of what they had experienced. The simple woman observed quietly, taking in the changes with a sense of calm satisfaction. She understood that her journey was not just about personal achievement, but about showing others the power of dedication, authenticity, and courage. When the day came to an end, the judges gathered the contestants for final remarks. They highlighted standout performances, and the simple woman received special mention, not only for the quality of her singing but for the impact she had on the room. Her voice had set a new standard, inspired respect, and reminded everyone present of the importance of perseverance and sincerity in artistic endeavors. The applause was warm and genuine, a reflection of the admiration she had earned through effort and heart. She accepted it quietly, smiling, feeling the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing she had shared something meaningful. As she left the theater that evening, the streets were bathed in the soft glow of sunset. She walked slowly, reflecting, on the journey that had brought her here and the journey that lay ahead. The challenges of future rounds no longer felt daunting. She felt prepared not just in skill but in confidence and spirit. The memory of the judges' and contestants' reactions reinforced a quiet truth she had always known. That authenticity and dedication would always shine through no matter the setting or circumstance. Back in the quiet of her home, she allowed herself to relax, feeling the music still resonating within her. She reflected on the lessons learned, the hearts touched, and the perceptions changed. The laughter and mockery of the past were now distant memories, replaced by acknowledgement and respect. She understood that her journey was about more than winning a competition. It was about embracing her voice, sharing her story, and inspiring others to recognize that true talent is often found in the most unexpected places. The Simple Woman's performance had become a symbol, a reminder that courage, authenticity, and perseverance can transform not only the performer, but everyone who witnesses the art. As night fell, she sat quietly by the window, thinking about the next steps in her journey. The world had begun to notice, but she remained grounded, focused on the music and the story she had to tell. Her heart was filled with quiet determination, knowing that this was only the beginning. The day's events had proven that passion and authenticity could defy expectation, and she felt ready to continue, ready to share her voice, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The room may have changed, the audience may have shifted, but her purpose remained the same: to sing from the heart, to touch lives, and to let her music speak when words alone could not. In that realization, she found a sense of peace, strength, and unwavering confidence, knowing that the journey she had begun was destined to leave a lasting impression. The final day of auditions arrived with a quiet anticipation that felt different from the first. The Simple Woman entered the theater with a calm resolve, her plain folder clutched gently against her chest. She had grown accustomed to the stage, to the lights, and to the eyes of judges and contestants alike. But today, there was something new in the air, a sense of expectancy. People remembered her, the first note that had left everyone flabbergasted, and now whispers of admiration and curiosity followed her as she made her way to the waiting area. She did not let it overwhelm her. Instead, she focused on the music, in her heart, reminding herself that this journey was about sharing her voice, not seeking validation. Backstage, she prepared quietly, humming softly under her breath. She reviewed the lyrics in her folder and felt the familiar rhythm of the song settle into her bones. Her hands were steady, her mind focused, and her heart calm. She could hear other contestants warming up, some with skill, others with nerves, but none of it distracted her. She had learned to create a small space around herself where only the music existed. This was her zone, her sanctuary, and nothing could intrude on it. The energy of the room was different now. Respect had replaced doubt, and admiration had replaced mockery. Even those who had once laughed at her now watched with a subtle awe, understanding that her talent was genuine and extraordinary. When her turn was called, she rose with quiet confidence. Each step toward the stage felt deliberate, a rhythm she controlled, a dance that mirrored the calm strength she had cultivated. The judges looked up as she approached, their expressions a mix of expectation and curiosity. They knew what she was capable of, yet they were eager to see how she would continue to grow and surprise. Contestants backstage held their breath, some whispering words of encouragement, others silently acknowledging the courage it took to stand where she did. She acknowledged them with a small nod, polite and unassuming, then turned her focus to the stage and the song that had carried her this far. She opened her folder, placed it on the stand, and let her fingers brush over the pages briefly. She did not need them, but the touch grounded her. The first note came out soft yet perfectly clear, and the room responded instantly. Silence fell, a hush that spoke louder than any applause could. She felt the connection between her voice and the listeners, the way each note could reach beyond appearances and touch something deep inside. Her song carried the story of her life, the challenges she had faced, the nights spent practicing alone, and the quiet perseverance that had defined her journey. It was a performance that was both personal and universal, a bridge between her heart and the hearts of everyone present. As she continued, her confidence grew, and her voice became richer, more expressive. The judges leaned forward, captivated, scribbling notes with renewed admiration. Contestants who had once doubted her felt a mixture of awe and humility. They realized that what she possessed went beyond technical skill. It was an authenticity that could not be replicated or learned in lessons. Every phrase, every breath, every subtle inflection carried the weight of experience and passion. The audience felt it too, drawn in by the purity and sincerity of her performance. For a moment, the room existed only in the music, a shared space of emotion and connection. Her song reached its crescendo, a note held with such strength and emotion that it seemed to hang in the air, demanding attention and respect. The silence that followed was profound, almost sacred. It was a moment where the world paused, allowing everyone to absorb the power of her voice. When the note finally ended, there was a beat of hesitation before the applause erupted, spontaneous, heartfelt, and overwhelming. Judges stood, clapping with genuine admiration, some exchanging looks of astonishment. Contestants joined in, some with smiles, some still in shock, unable to believe what they had witnessed. The simple woman stood on the stage, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the song, feeling a quiet joy and satisfaction that came from knowing she had given her all. Backstage, the judges invited her for a brief conversation. They praised not only her talent but also her character, the humility, dedication, and authenticity that shone through every note. They asked about her training, her journey, and how she had cultivated such a compelling voice. She spoke honestly, describing the nights spent practicing alone, the small victories and moments of self-doubt, and the passion that had kept her singing despite it all. The judges listened intently, clearly impressed by the depth of her experience and the sincerity she brought to her music. Their words were affirming, but she did not let them define her. She had come to sing, to share her voice, and that remained her purpose above all else. As she returned to the waiting area, she noticed the subtle changes in the room. Contestants who had once dismissed her now approached with respect and curiosity. Some asked for advice on technique, others simply offered quiet congratulations. Even the ones who had been most skeptical seemed humbled, recognizing that her talent and dedication could not be measured by appearances. She accepted their words with gentle gratitude, understanding that her journey had already left an impact. The room felt different, lighter, and more connected, as if her performance had taught a silent lesson about perseverance, humility, and the power of authentic expression. Throughout the day, the final performances continued, but her presence lingered in the minds of everyone present. Judges referred to her multiple times, discussing what made her performance exceptional and how it had elevated the competition. Contestants reflected on their own approaches, inspired and challenged by what they had witnessed. The simple woman observed quietly, aware that her role had grown beyond performing. She had become a symbol of courage and authenticity, a reminder that talent can emerge from unexpected places, and that genuine dedication is always visible in the work itself. When the final round concluded, the judges gathered all the contestants to announce the results. The simple woman was recognized once again, not only for the strength and beauty of her voice but also for the effect she had on the room. Her performances had changed the dynamics, inspired respect, and reminded everyone of the power of sincerity in art. The applause she received was heartfelt and warm, a reflection of the admiration she had earned through effort, talent, and character. She accepted it with a quiet smile, feeling the deep satisfaction of having shared something meaningful, knowing that her voice had touched others and shifted perceptions. Walking out of the theater that evening, the streets were bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The day's experiences played over in her mind, each moment reinforcing the quiet truth she had always known, that authenticity, dedication, and heart cannot be ignored. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not only for her own growth but for the lessons imparted to those who had witnessed her journey. Her first note, which had left everyone flabbergasted, had grown into a story of perseverance, courage, and the transformative power of music. At home, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. Sitting quietly by the window, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the long hours of practice, the moments of doubt, the initial laughter and skepticism of others. She understood that those moments had shaped her, strengthened her resolve, and prepared her to step into the spotlight with confidence. Her voice had carried more than just notes. It had carried her story, her heart, and her unwavering belief in the power of music. She smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of peace and satisfaction. The journey ahead promised new challenges, but she felt ready. She knew that future auditions, performances, and opportunities would test her in different ways, but the lessons she had learned about perseverance, authenticity, and the importance of believing in oneself would guide her. She felt a quiet strength that no judgment, doubt, or external expectation could shake. Her music, her heart, and her determination had created a foundation that would carry her forward. As night fell, she closed her eyes and let the memory of her performances wash over her. Each note, each reaction, each small gesture of admiration was a reminder of what she could achieve when she remained true to herself. The simple woman who had once walked into the theater unnoticed, underestimated, and quietly determined had become someone whose talent, courage, and heart could not be ignored. The first note had been just the beginning, and now, with each performance, she had written a story of inspiration, resilience, and the transformative power of music. The quiet of her home allowed her to reflect on the impact of her journey. She understood that her voice had not only impressed judges and contestants, but had also left an impression on herself. She had proven to herself that dedication and authenticity could overcome doubt and ridicule. She had discovered the strength of her own talent and the depth of her resilience, and in that understanding she found a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music had touched hearts and changed perceptions. As she drifted into sleep, she carried with her a gentle excitement for the future. The journey was far from over, but she had proven that her voice, her heart, and her determination were forces to be reckoned with. The simple woman who had once been underestimated now stood as a testament to the power of passion, authenticity, and courage. And with that she slept, ready to embrace the next chapter of her story, her music, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead.